3 pairs of socks. That was my solution for years. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning, feet so cold I couldn't feel them below the ankle, and I'd put on a third pair of wool socks and wait. Wait for warmth that sometimes never came. I'm 83. I've been diabetic for 19 years, and for a long time I accepted cold feet the same way I accepted gray hair, something that just happens, something the body does when it gets old. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about both things, the cause and the cure. And the 2 habits I stopped doing after 83 were not complicated, they did not require a prescription, and they were not the kind of thing my doctor ever connected to my feet. Not because he didn't care, because in a 12-minute appointment, nobody has time to explain why what you eat at 8 o'clock at night is still affecting the temperature of your feet at 2 in the morning. I'm going to explain that connection today. The mechanism is real, it's documented, and once you understand it, you will never look at your evening routine the same way. But before I get to the 2 habits, I need to tell you what was actually happening in my feet. Because poor circulation is not a real explanation, it's a category. What changed for me started when I understood the specific biological process that was working against me while I slept, and it has everything to do with blood sugar. Not just the number on your meter, but what that number is doing hour by hour to the smallest blood vessels in your body. Pay attention to this part because this is the part nobody explains at the pharmacy counter. Your peripheral nerves, the ones that run down your legs into your feet, and the tiny blood vessels that feed them are extraordinarily sensitive to elevated glucose. More sensitive than your heart, more sensitive than your kidneys in the early years. Research published in a landmark paper by Dr. Michael Brownlee in Nature established the central mechanism. When blood sugar stays elevated over time, it produces compounds called advanced glycation end products. The body of research calls them AGEs. These compounds accumulate inside the walls of small blood vessels and along the surface of nerve fibers. They stiffen vessel walls. They reduce the elasticity those vessels need to dilate and push blood all the way to your extremities. They damage the nerve fibers themselves, changing how those nerves communicate and how well they regulate local blood flow. The result, for many people living with diabetes, is exactly what the clinical literature describes: sensations of cold, numbness, tingling, and burning. Not because the feet are broken, because the blood supply to those feet is being slowly compromised by what the sugar is doing, night after night, in the vessels that serve them. A comprehensive review in Diabetes Care by Pop Busui and colleagues confirmed that peripheral neuropathy, the kind that starts in the feet and works upward, is one of the most common long-term complications of type 2 diabetes, and that the underlying vascular and nerve damage accumulates over years of exposure to elevated glucose, including overnight exposure when most people assume the risk is lower because they're not eating. That last part is what I did not understand for years. I thought the risk from blood sugar was at mealtime. Spike it, watch it come down, move on. But your blood sugar during sleep determines what your small vessels are being exposed to for 6, 7, 8 hours straight. And 2 things I was doing every single evening were keeping that number elevated far longer than I knew. If your feet burn at night, or go numb, or feel cold no matter how many socks you wear, please don't ignore it. I almost did, and I'm 80 years old. For years I told myself it was just age, the tingling, the heaviness in my legs climbing the stairs. But it wasn't age. It was my blood sugar quietly damaging the nerves and the circulation in my legs, and almost nobody warned me in time. If you let it keep going, those little signals turn into something you can't undo. I wasn't willing to lose my feet or my independence. So I started doing one thing every single day to help support healthy blood sugar and protect my legs. I'll show you exactly what in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. First habit I stopped was eating after dinner. Not a big meal. I wasn't eating a second dinner. I'm talking about what most people don't even count as eating. A handful of crackers around 8:30. A small bowl of cereal because it settled my stomach. A few graham crackers with some peanut butter, a piece of toast. The things we eat in the evening because we're not hungry exactly, just reaching for something. The things we don't write down in a food journal because they feel too small to matter. They are not too small to matter, not at night. and here is why. When you eat refined carbohydrates in the evening, even a modest amount, you produce a blood sugar spike. That spike happens at the exact same time your body's insulin sensitivity is naturally lower, because at night your cortisol is falling, your muscle activity is near zero, and the mechanisms your body uses to clear glucose from the bloodstream are running slower. Research connecting glycemic index and nighttime metabolism has established this pattern clearly. Evening carbohydrate intake, particularly refined carbohydrate with no significant fiber to slow it, produces a prolonged elevation that can persist for hours into your sleep. For someone without diabetes, the body compensates reasonably well. For someone with type 2 diabetes, that prolonged elevation means hours of elevated glucose flowing past the microvessel walls in your legs and feet. Hours of glycation products accumulating in the exact vessels that determine whether your feet are warm or cold when you wake up. I stopped the evening snacking. Not all of it. I still have something small before bed if I need it. But I stopped the refined carbohydrates, the crackers, the cereal, the toast. If I eat anything after 7:30, it is a small amount of protein, something that does not produce a meaningful glucose spike. 1 or 2 tablespoons of plain Greek yogurt, a handful of pumpkin seeds, which, as a side note, are one of the better sources of magnesium in your kitchen, and magnesium is directly involved in how well your insulin receptors function. Research from Dr. Barbagallo's work in Archives of Biochemistry and Biophysics found that a significant portion of people with type 2 diabetes, somewhere in the range of 25 to 38%, show low magnesium levels, and low magnesium makes the glucose problem worse. So the pumpkin seeds pull double duty. The first habit I stopped was the evening refined carbohydrate. The second one surprised me more, because the second habit I stopped was sitting still after dinner. For years, my routine after dinner was simple. Sit down, watch the news, let the food digest. That is what I believed letting food digest meant. Stillness, rest, give the body a chance to process. That belief was costing me circulation. Here's the mechanism that changed how I think about this. The muscles in your calves are not just for walking. They function as a second pump for your circulatory system. When those muscles contract, they squeeze the veins in your lower legs and push blood back up toward your heart. Physiologists have studied this for decades under the name the musculovenous pump. When you are sedentary, that pump is off. Blood pools in the lower legs. Venous pressure in the feet increases. And critically, the small vessels in your feet receive less fresh oxygenated blood because the return flow from your legs is stagnant. This matters for feet specifically because feet are the furthest point from your heart. They are already receiving blood through the narrowest vessels. When the venous pump is inactive and those vessels are being stiffened by glycation, the combination is exactly what produces cold feet at midnight. The second thing that happens when you move after a meal is something your muscles do independently of insulin. There is a glucose transporter in muscle tissue called GLUT4. When muscle fibers contract, GLUT4 activates and pulls glucose directly out of your bloodstream and into the muscle. No insulin required, no pancreas required. The muscle does the work that insulin is struggling to do because of insulin resistance. Research on post-meal movement, including work from Dr. Loretta DiPietro's group at George Washington University, has found that brief walking after dinner has a meaningful effect on the glucose curve in the hours that follow, including the hours when most people are asleep and their blood sugar is still elevated from that evening meal. I stopped sitting still after dinner. I do not run. I do not go to the gym at 8 at night. I walk around my block once, sometimes twice if the weather is decent, 10 to 15 minutes, slow enough that I can talk without losing my breath. That movement activates my calf muscles, turns the venous pump back on, and helps clear the post-dinner glucose before it has hours to run against my peripheral vessels while I sleep. I want to be clear about something. These 2 habit changes did not replace my medical care. I still see my doctor. I still manage my diabetes with the plan he and I developed together. Nothing in this video is a substitute for that. What I'm describing is what I added to that plan, and what I stopped doing that was working against it without my understanding why. A woman in my neighborhood, Dorothy, she's 78, she came to me a few months ago. She said she'd had burning feet for 3 years, was taking gabapentin for it, and still waking up at 4 in the morning in pain. She'd never connected it to her evening habits. She didn't think there was a connection. When I told her what I'm telling you now, the mechanism, the glycation, the venous pump, she said no one had ever explained it that way. She started with the same 2 changes I made. I'm not going to tell you Dorothy is cured. That is not my claim to make. What I will tell you is that 3 months later, she told me she was down to 2 pairs of socks. That is not a clinical outcome. It is a direction, and directions matter. Here is the full picture of what I do now in the evenings, because the 2 habits I stopped created room for 2 things I added, and together they work as a system. I stopped the refined carbohydrates after dinner. If I need something before bed, it is protein or magnesium-rich food, nothing that spikes glucose. I take a 10-minute walk after dinner every night, regardless of the weather. On cold nights, I walk around the inside of the house if I have to. The point is the calf muscles moving, the venous pump running, the post-dinner glucose being handled by my muscles instead of pooling in my bloodstream. I also pay attention to hydration, because dehydrated cells concentrate glucose in the blood. A glass of water before bed, not tea with caffeine, not juice, just water, is part of the system. And I keep my bedroom cool. I know that sounds unrelated to feet, but deep sleep is when your body does its best repair work on vessels and nerves. Restorative, slow-wave sleep requires your core temperature to drop. A bedroom above 70 degrees significantly reduces the time you spend in that restorative stage. I keep mine at 66. It was a programmable thermostat. It cost $30 at the hardware store. And what happens during those cool hours of deep sleep is part of what determines the circulation your feet wake up with in the morning. These are not complicated changes. They're not expensive. They require no prescription. They require understanding the mechanism, which you now have. If you made it this far, you already understand more about your own legs than most people your age ever will. That matters. You know now that the burning, the numbness, the cold feet, they trace back to one thing: blood sugar slowly working against your nerves and circulation. And you know the goal isn't a miracle. It's protecting your ability to stand, to walk, to stay independent. That's why, alongside everything I showed you today, I use a simple daily support to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range, so my legs keep carrying me where I want to go. I put the free presentation in the description below. Go watch it. And as always, keep working with your doctor. This supports your routine. It doesn't replace it. If you have been managing diabetes for years and you are still waking up with cold feet, with numbness, with that deep concrete feeling in your legs, I want you to hear this. It is not simply age. It is a process. And processes have inputs. Change the inputs, and the process changes. Think about the people your age you know who still walk without wincing, still get out of a chair without gripping the armrest, still feel their feet when they put them on the floor in the morning. And think about the ones who don't. The difference is rarely luck. It is almost always the accumulation of small decisions made in the hours nobody is watching, the evening hours, the middle of the night hours, the habits that never get written down because they feel too small to matter. They are not too small. The vessels in your feet are measuring every one of them. If today made you look at your evening differently, drop your fasting blood sugar number in the comments and add the word socks. I want to know where you're starting, because where you start is not where you have to stay. For those who want additional support alongside everything I've covered today, there's a link below this video. It outlines a targeted nutritional approach designed to support healthy blood sugar levels as a complement to your doctor's plan, not a replacement for it. If you're already doing the work your doctor asked you to do, and you want to support your body further, that link is where to go next. One last thing before you go. Next week, I'm covering the one morning drink that a significant number of people over 70 are using as a health habit that research suggests may actually be spiking their blood sugar before breakfast. They think they're doing the right thing. They've been doing it for years. It is in more refrigerators than you'd expect. That video is next.